So we're fast forward into, let's say, the early 80s, and I started we just made this transition once Jimmy wanted to part ways and he wanted to go in another direction. I can't remember it being a definitive, argument or anything drastic like that. We just kind of went into separate corners. And me and Chris decided we were going to start a new band. I wanted to call the band the Bats. And this was before the Congress Avenue Bridge phenomena, so don't get it twisted.
Yeah,
it had nothing to do with that.
That didn't even come to mind, man.
No, my intrigue was I had seen this. There was this. It was a grade B, like a science fiction movie. Something. I think it was called like Nightwing or something like that. But it was about bats that had gotten hold of some exposure to uranium, and they were like these radioactive bats, and and they got bigger, and they created a swarm, and they invaded this city and everything. And then this scientist was talking about the behavior of bats, them being nocturnal, being so sensitive to the sound waves and all of that stuff, the way that they communicated, through echolocution or whatever they call it, know what I'm saying? Anyway, I got really intrigued by this diatribe that this scientist was talking about these bats. And I said, that sounds a lot like musicians to me.
Cool. Yeah.
And then I like the association of the bats with the vampire stories, just kind of that occult sort of eerie, aspect of it. And I'm thinking to myself, like, that's really kind of cool. And then I had read somewhere in an article that Noel Redding used to refer to Jimi Hendrix as the bat because he was a nocturnal individual that slept all through the day. You know what I'm saying? They used to call him the bat because he hibernated through the course of the day. And then I read somewhere that expression bats was also like considered a racial epithet. It was kind of intriguing to me just from the aspect of it, thinking like, oh, well, that's interesting. I never thought about that way. But I just loved the fact that it was a short name, 4 letters, that would render itself to a lot of great graphic representation with the 4 letters.
Business
short,
mind
punchy, like, because I'm thinking like The Who or like Kiss. And of course, Chris, again, was another really talented graphic artist.
Oh, nice.
Like Jimmy Siraj. That's always a soft spot. A musician that has like an artistic skill, it's almost a soft spot for me. You know what I'm saying? And so Chris became like our de rigueur, like poster artist. And I've got some great samples that you can actually find online, things that he rendered himself for our gigs and so on and so forth. And we just kept building on that. So the Bats kind of had that kind of just that punchy kind of punk rock, edgy sort of thing. You know what I'm saying? Because there were other bands out there like the Skunks or the Next or, whatever, the Big Boys, and the Bats. It just popped and
it just worked for you.
Looked good in print. You know what I mean? And then, of course, you could really design well around it. Anyway, we got into it, and I kind of cherry-picked a handful of musicians as the rhythm section, and we started playing at the Continental Club as the Bats. And with me up front, it didn't take long for like the buzz to kind of pick up because I just had this, really kind of hyperbolic presentation. It wasn't me trying to imitate Mick Jagger or Iggy Pop or James Brown or any of those things, but it was kind of like a confluence of all of those things that I had observed over the years, right? And
your influences were coming out.
I just had a real great inventory of like what I call shapes, poses, like how to just command the stage, how to move. I was always a fairly good natural dancer anyway, you know what I'm saying? And that was the other side of the coin. Like, there wasn't any type of choreography or anything like that in the punk rock sector. Presentation was not really heavily conceived or thought of, There was a couple of bands that I thought were really consistent with their presentation. I had all of those prototypes like firmly implanted in my mind. You know what I'm saying? So there was no blueprint. It's like every song brought forth a different type of persona in me. And I knew who I knew who all of the greatest performers were. Guys that just had a certain type of energy. And the music would dictate which persona would pop out. It wasn't like, oh, for this song, I'm going to act this way. For that song, I'm going to act this way.
It just kind of came out with whatever was going on.
It's just like, what can I say? It was just kind of like a formula. It was kind of like a chemical reaction. But it was never dull, right? And before you know it, we had reputations for like, tearing the ceilings out of stages and things like that. Because I love to just like throw the mic. I used to be a weightlifter. I used to train to perform, literally. Run 4 miles a day, you know what I'm saying? So my body was athletic, which is the other reason that I wanted to move up front, because I had like the 6-pack and the whole
persona.
And the whole thing was going on. And it's very precarious, because you also have to be mindful that you're not just falling into somebody else's shadow, because you're always going to get comparisons.
Sure.
Right? And if you do anything other than just stand there, the first thing people want to say is, oh, he reminds me of Mick Jagger, or he reminds me of, James Brown, or this, that, and the other. Because Prince wasn't even a thing yet. You got to bear that in mind. Like in 1980, Prince was like not on the zeitgeist that way, like in people's minds. It wasn't until that Dirty Mind album came out, and that caught my attention, because people pulled it to my attention. They're like, man, this guy's kind of looking like you, like that sort of thing. I'm like, well, I'm not having that.
Yeah.
I mean, what can I do about it? You know what I'm saying? Because his album is out. But, now I've got to be mindful that I don't just drift into. My thing was, I got to see this guy. I got to see him. And again, there's no YouTube in 1980. I mean, if I don't see him on television, how am I going to see him? Unless he shows up.
Yeah.
So anyway, my point was, there's nothing I can do about that. I'm not going to walk on any eggshells, keep looking over my shoulder, but I have to be mindful. Like, here's another archetype that I have to be mindful of not
duplicating.
Yes. Falling into mimicry or something like that. Right. So as the Bats started to progress, then we finally got an opportunity to record. And I met this gentleman at the Continental Club named John Rollo, who was a British engineer who formerly had been a chief engineer for Ray Davies and the Kinks at Ray Davies' complex in England called Conch Studios. Met him through a mutual friend, a young lady named Janet Jackson. And she said, John caught your show. He wants to call you. Let me have your phone number. I'll give it to him, and he'll give you a call sometime next week. I didn't think a lot of it, because I didn't speak to him, one-on-one.
Right.
I just kind of, okay, cool. Here's the number. Thanks for passing it along. Let's see what happens, Now, you got to bear in mind, Steven, studio time was like the golden fleece in those days, because you just don't have facilities to like, you don't have access to like Porta Studios.
Right. Home studios weren't really a thing.
The way that we have them, the way that we were able to get the, 4-track or 8-track Tascams even in the 90s.
Yeah.
That really wasn't a feasible situation. And in Austin, there weren't that many studios to speak of to begin with, under the best of circumstances, right? But what happened was, in 79, the Bats had an opportunity to go into a brand new facility that was called Third Coast Recording. It was initially situated between 5th and 6th Street, like on the little feeder road, 5th and 6th downtown on the east side. But at that time, it was an isolated, large-scale soundstage studio that was ostensibly built as a soundstage for television and film. Anyway, I got backing from a talent manager named Elisa O'Leary, who was managing a group called D-Day that had managed to get a record deal. I can't recall what the label was that signed them. I think it may have been RCA, something of that nature. But anyway, they had a legit major label deal. And Lisa was a big fan of the Bats. And so she said, hey, I'd like to basically sponsor taking you into the studio, get a demo tape together. Maybe I can help get you a deal, that sort of thing, since they already had one. And we went in over the course of, I think we recorded over the course of 3 days. I think we recorded like a six song demo. And I've still got an iteration of it somewhere in my collection. But we recorded pretty fast because we were tracking everything like in real time.
Mm-hmm.
Like we were recording live to tape.
I see. Full band.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And then I would go back and I would do my vocal overdubs.
I see.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
In isolation. And of course, then Chris would go back and put guitar part and guitar part and guitar part and layer like that. You know what I'm saying? So we had a pretty solid, head start with a demo tape by the time I met this guy, John Rollo. So that's what it was. When my friend Janet was getting my phone number, she said, give me that tape. I'll take it back to John. And then a few days later, he called me at home, of course, British accent, the whole 9 yards. He's saying, this is a really, really good tape. I wanted to see if I could get you into a facility that I'm working on. There's a new facility that we're developing down in Uvalde, Texas.
Oh, okay.
It's called Indian Creek Studios. And the guy that was designing the studio apparently was the same architect that designed the so-called Caribou Ranch facility where Elton John recorded this album called Rock of the Westies in the late 70s. Supposedly it was a state-of-the-art unit with a Neve console. But it was also like a residential facility. It was designed to be a studio where you could live there.
I see.
Like a hotel.
Right.
Had lodging and all of that stuff, So we said, okay, well, this sounds great. Let's just check it out.
Yeah.
And so I had a manager at that time named Ron Backer. And Ron went down in advance just to scout it, just to see what the facility entailed, if it was all that it was cracked up to be. And he came back with a positive report going like, yeah, man, this thing is really nice. You can come down and see it. And apparently they built this facility like on a big goat ranch property, Okay. There's nothing else around it for as far as the eye could see. But, it was a really well designed, beautiful, environmental situation with this Neve console. So once again, we went there and recorded like this 6-song demo. By then I had a new drummer named Johnny Medina. And I wound up playing drums on 3 of the 6 tracks that we recorded just to expedite the whole process. Because Johnny wasn't 100% broken in, on all the material, but I was still capable of playing.
Right.
I hadn't gone rusty from just,
being the front man.
Yeah. You know what I mean? So anyway, we did all of that. What happened next, John said, I want to take these tapes to New York. The long and the short of it was he went to New York and people started talking like they were interested in me as a solo artist and wanted to kind of like extract me from the band setting. And they were talking about the idea of forming another type of situation around me. And I just wasn't comfortable with that because Chris and I were so tightly bonded.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So ostensibly, I kind of just took a pass on that first overture because it was kind of like, well, look, if you don't take my man, you're not gonna, dissect us like that.
Right. Well, that was your sound. It's because of him.
From my side of the fence, it was like not even an option.
Right.
You know what I mean? So one thing led to another, and we soldiered on. And then shortly thereafter, we got notification that there was another band out of New Zealand called the Bats that was starting to hit the zeitgeist, right? So that's when we made the decision to change the name from the Bats to Bonsai Kick.
Okay.
And when we made the transition to Bonsai Kick, by that time, we had a relationship with Clubfoot to where we essentially kind of had a residency, you know what I'm saying? So as 81 evolved, approaching 82, we had one situation where we were playing a show and Steve Van Zandt from the E Street Band saw us by happenstance because he was going to be performing the following day.
I see.
With a side project that he was touring called the Disciples of Soul, right? So he had a side project. At this time, apparently, this was when Bruce Springsteen was playing acoustic in support of that album that he did called Nebraska. So he had the E Street Band on hiatus during that time. So Little Steven had this rock band, this hard rock presentation out.
Yeah.
Right? Anyway, Ann Barton was with Steve, and she brought him back to meet me, right?
Okay.
Apparently he was going like, I'd like to meet this guy. She's like, well, yeah, Bev's my friend. And she brought him back to meet me. And we had a conversation. And in no uncertain terms, he was saying, man, if you could make it to New York, I think I could produce you. He goes, I think people would really dig what you're doing in New York if you could make it there, that sort of thing.
Wow.
And it was just kind of an overture, kind of open-ended, And so we exchanged numbers. Some time went by, and one thing led to another, and I kept just getting this instinct that I really feel like I want to pursue this. The stars are dark, swear, as I fill up the universe, it's not finished yet. Hey, balloon head, you're in my life. Hey, balloon head, sailing off out of sight. Because I felt in Austin, I'd kind of hit the so-called glass ceiling.
Sure.
I mean, I'm like 28 years old, you know what I mean? And I'm not any closer to a major breakthrough because there's no music industry here.
Right.
So one thing led to another, and I've probably got, I've got at least 12 songs in demo form through 2 different studio sessions, and then another 30 songs backlog that Chris and I had just kind of warehoused over the course of, our developmental productions and things of that nature. And I'm thinking to myself, I got nothing to lose if I can just find a window of opportunity, to go and check this out. And I was talking to my manager, Ron Backer, about it, you know what I'm saying? And he's like, well, you guys have a really good, momentum developed here in the city. Maybe just give it another year, that sort of thing, and see what may pop or whatever. But it was always a situation where we were always just looking for another opportunity to open for a large touring attraction that maybe another A&R person might be in attendance.
I see.
And it was just kind of what I call these happenstance, long shot, roll of the dice.
Yeah.
If such and such lines up, maybe this could happen, woulda, coulda, shoulda, whatever. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it's not like it would be a New York type situation where it's like there's 10 labels here for you to shop that tape over the course of a month or whatever. If you could just stay in New York for 30 days, maybe you could just have an opportunity to make the rounds, you know what I'm saying, and see if something could happen. So that was my quandary, So I just so happened to meet a girl that had graduated from the University of Texas, and her name was Stephanie Fox. She was a photographer, and she and I became friendly. One thing led to another. We started pairing up, as a couple, so to speak. And then she told me that she was really prepared to move to New York on her own because she wanted to basically pursue her photography career. And she had the drive to do it. And she said, well, if I could get set up, maybe you could come and stay with me for a while, see what's going on with your music deal, that sort of thing. And that's how the whole thing really started to culminate, right? So I had this ace in the hole, which was Steve, and I had this other ace in the hole, which was John Rollo.
Right.
So I come to find out that John Rollo had relocated to New York and that he was there. And then lo and behold, by the time Stephanie decided that she was going to basically relocate, I was like, yeah, well, let's have a garage sale and let me just unload everything that I don't essentially need, because it's not like I had a lot of earthly possessions anyway, because I had literally just suffered the experience of a house fire in 1979, and I'd lost everything that I had when I was living in an apartment complex just on the north shore of I-35 in Town Lake, right?
Okay.
November of 1979, I was in this small apartment complex, and unfortunately, one of my neighbors had fallen asleep with a cigarette, apparently, and self-immolated, and it set this whole complex on fire. And I only had time to get my drum set out of the apartment, but at that time, I actually had acquired quite a few worldly possessions. I had like a really great library of art and music books, and I had a really great, prodigious record collection, probably close to 700 albums, at that time. And I had a really well-stocked walk-in closet of not just street clothes, but stage costumes and things of that nature, so it was a major blow,
Absolutely.
And,
jeez.
Yeah, that happened in November 1979. And so, as we fast forward, it wasn't like I had like just a stockpile of material possessions to be concerned about. And I was literally in my head just chasing the clock.
Yeah.
The
stars were aligning for
because Stevie had gotten his deal with Epic and was out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's like anytime somebody that close to you kind of crosses that threshold, right? It makes it extremely tangible.
Yeah.
Although it could be a million miles away, still in your head, there's like, wow, if he could bridge that, I still believe that I can. You know what I mean? But I know that I'm not going to do it if I'm just waiting for something magical to happen here. I got to go to where it's happening. You know what I'm saying?
Makes sense.
So I just saw the whole thing as like, celestial intervention, of God like lining things up, by giving me the opportunity to meet somebody significant like Steven Van Zandt, by having a relationship with John Rollo, by John Rollo being in New York, by meeting Stephanie being, prepared to move to New York, so I have at least a platform, a soft landing, so to speak.
Right.
And then it got even more kismet because we had some friends with a local band called Standing Waves that had attempted to relocate to New York City in search of whatever, a record deal or whatever. And they went ostensibly and kind of like ran out of financial means.
Mhm.
And they had to come back to Austin. So they had to surrender this apartment that they had. And their keyboard player was a friend of Steph's. And they kind of had made this handshake that we could come and squat on their lease. And they could like vacate without, violating their whatever their deposit situation was predicated on. And it would give us a temporary soft landing until we could, find a spot of our own.
Yeah.
So that was just another kismet, opportunity. So it was the winter of 82 that I bit the bullet and moved to New York. And after I got there, after the so-called, holiday season
Mm-hmm.
had kind of clarified, I'd actually made contact with John Rollo. And of all things, he told me that he had been in the studio with Steve Van Zandt.
Oh, man.
So it seemed like a putt
Yeah.
at this point in
Right.
time.
Yeah.
I've got these two guys working together, supposedly at this facility called Right Track Studios in Manhattan, not far from the Chrysler Building. But believe it or not, every time that I went to meet up with John at the studio, it seems like Steve Van Zandt had just left or had postponed a session. And after a couple of these instances, I started to get this eerie feeling that something was just a little bit askance, you know what I'm saying? And it didn't immediately add up to me, but it seemed that I was being manipulated.
Right.
There was a little bit of obfuscation
Mm-hmm.
going on. And I think the fact of the matter was that John was trying to keep me in an adverse position from Steve because I had told John that I was looking for Steve.
I see. And
You know
John
what I mean?
wanted you.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so that was so frustrating, It was so frustrating. But we didn't have a straight up falling out about it. It just took me some time to like put two and two together, you know what I'm saying, to figure out like, okay, there's a game going on.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. Eventually I got a call from Steve Van Zandt. He called me where I was staying.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me, man, he goes, I'm so glad to hear from you, but your timing couldn't have been more awkward because I just got called back into rehearsals with this E Street band because this essentially Bruce Springsteen had decided to reunite the band to start production for what would be Born in the USA.
Wow. Okay.
So, okay, well, I'm already here.
Yeah.
And I'm not going back to Austin with my tail between my legs, haven't gotten this far.
Right.
And, Stephanie and I had paired up. And so the whole idea was that I said, well, look, man, I'm going to make it or break it one way or the other, you know? And I literally had kind of resigned myself to just work, whatever positions that I could get. I think I started out working as a runner for a production company that we had a mutual friend at Carnegie Hall that had a TV production company, and I became like a location scout and a runner and this, that, and the other thing, you know what I'm saying? And that's how I learned my way around the city.
Okay.
Right? And then I got myself another night job, at some sort of telecommunication job, I can't remember what we were doing. We were selling something. I don't know if we were selling magazines or what the hell we were doing, but it was something to generate income. And then I got another one of those jobs, and I had like two sales position jobs, and I was working those two positions alongside this, production studio position or whatever, and we were just barely making ends meet, to keep the lights on, as they say, all the while trying not to be evicted as squatters, in this situation.
Were you Were you getting on stage at all? Were you still writing music?
Not at that time. No, I was
Okay.
literally, just,
You had to make ends meet, like I said.
I'm just literally hanging in there by the skin of my
Yeah.
teeth, trying to find some sort of traction. Now, eventually what happened was I'm trying to put two and two together, but eventually what happened was I met this guy I had this friend named, somehow I crossed paths with this guy named Gary Window, who was a sax player that used to tour with the Psychedelic Furs. There was a big band from England that was popular in the 80s called the Psychedelic Furs. And I'd met these guys here in Austin. Because in Austin, I'm meeting everybody that like comes through.
Right.
It was like a routine de rigueur thing because I'm like dialed in with all of the promoters, and not only that, more so all the stagehands at all the venues knew me, as a performer and as a personal friend or whatever. And I could go to any sound check anytime to see anything, anybody, any circumstances.
You're part of it.
Yeah,
you're in it.
I had access. So anyway, I met this guy, Gary Window, and somehow we had crossed paths during that period. And he hired me on as a session drummer for some studio work that he was contracted for.
Okay.
And through that, he introduced me to the guy that contracted him, who happened to be Hal Wilner, who was like the talent producer, the talent buyer for Saturday Night Live.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Whoa.
And through Hal, I started working and getting like side gigs.
I see. Yeah.
As a drummer while I was in Manhattan.
Okay.
But at that time, I was still having to like lease. In some cases, I had to like lease drum kits. In other cases, the sessions, there was obviously a kit on site, you know what I'm saying? But just to get my chops back up to, professional standard, I had taken to like leasing kits at like SIR, Studio Instrument Rentals in Manhattan. Small studio, but it was like my space.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But the sessions that I could book, I'm making like anywhere from $1,500 to $2,000 a day.
It's good money.
It's great, except it's New York.
Yeah, that's true.
And so it's like monopoly money. It'd be great money in Austin. It'd keep me afloat for months. But in New York, it's like they don't have no respect for anything under $100,000.
Yeah.
You see what I'm trying to say?
Right. I got you.
That money evaporates. Oof. My point being, though, is like now I'm starting to circulate, meaning I'm starting to
getting around town,
rub shoulders, with various musicians and this, that, and the other thing. And I get my situation. I get a situation where I met this individual named Brad Balfour, who was a writer at the Village Voice. And he was a DJ at this little venue that was called the Bebop Cafe on West 8th Street in the Village. And the Bebop Cafe was just adjacent to Electric Lady Studios, Jimi Hendrix's recording facility, that by now was a very successful commercial facility. Obviously one of the top 5 facilities in the city, and this place, the Bebop Cafe, was like a watering hole for musicians.
Gotcha.
Like famous musicians, right? So by happenstance, I had a copy of a demo tape that I had cut with John Rollo in Texas on me. And Brad asked to hear it, And he said, well, which one of these should I play? I said, well, play this track called Noisy Music. We had this big anthemic track that sounded like kind of like a The Who meets AC/DC or something like that. Bro. But anyway, it's this big bombastic thing. And caught a lot of people's attention, like in the venue. You know, people
Mhm.
started buzzing, this, that, and the other thing. And this young lady named Casey Napoli came to Brad and asked for an introduction to me, and I met her. And then she told me she had a boyfriend who was an engineer at Media Sound Studio.
Mhm.
His name was Tim Hatfield, and I should meet him. He's from Texas, and this, that, and the other thing. So Media Sound Studio was, again, one of the top echelon studios in the city, alongside the Hit Factory and the Record Plant, Right Track Studios, you know, the Power Station where Nile Rodgers had cut so many hit records. There was like, you know, New York, there's probably 20 studios that were like considered industry standard.
Yeah.
And out of those 20, 10 of them were like international magnets
Gotcha.
for the industry. Media Sound was one of those studios. And I met with Tim and I played him my demos, and he was impressed with the demos. And we started talking about forming a production company and this, that, and the other thing. And he just loved the fact that I was from Austin and that I looked like I was from England and the whole 9 yards. You know what I'm saying? And that was the thing. And so it was just this gradual pastiche of me meeting people incrementally and finding some sort of foothold of stability in community.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had the good opportunity to get involved with a internship project at NYU at the Institute of Audio Research. And I applied for that, and I got accepted to come in to study audio engineering at the Institute of Audio Research, right? And I had it was like a 6-month program where you come out with a certificate after you know, went through the regimen and passed these exams and this, that, and the other thing, so that you wouldn't blow somebody's equipment up, you know, by patching the wrong thing to the wrong thing, et cetera, and so forth, right? And I was doing this at night. And once I got that internship, then Tim gave me an internship at Media Sound, which gave me the ability to come to the studio with him and work as his assistant on legitimate sessions.
Yeah.
And there was a whole variety of things, everything from like Aretha Franklin sessions to Sesame Street sessions to Whitney Houston sessions to Kiss sessions and blah, 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 you know. And I'm just basically like, you know, the patchworm, you know, just getting down there, you know what I'm saying, and learning how to basically, you know, connect cables and patch bays and this, that, and the other thing. You know what I'm saying? But I didn't have any real pressure on me, because it was literally a situation of watch and learn and trial by error and this, that, and the other, and don't worry about anything because I'm here and I'm not going to let you destroy
Good
yourself.
mentor.
You dig what I mean?
Yeah.
But the other side of the coin was we really did vibe as friends. Now, the benefit of that was I had free studio time on the weekends. Free. Free. In one of the top studios in the city.
Yeah. Wow.
Now, what are you going to do with that? Right?
Use the hell out of it.
Okay. So what happened was it gets better. Over the course of one of these sessions, I meet this individual named Steve Blucher. Steve Blucher turns out to be one of the co-founders of DiMarzio Pickups, the pickup company, DiMarzio.
Oh, yeah.
Well, he and Larry DiMarzio were partners, and they started together from scratch.
Wow.
Right? Steve's also a guitarist, right? And turns out he was in this band called Susan with Ricky Byrd, who was the guitar player for all the Joan Jett and the Blackhearts records.
Wow.
Right? So he and Ricky Byrd were like best friends. Ricky Byrd's wife at that time was a lady named Carol Kay, and she worked directly for the Lieber Krebs organization, which is one of the biggest management firms in Manhattan.
Okay.
Lieber Krebs, at one point on their roster, they had Aerosmith at the top of the chain, Ted Nugent in his prime, the Scorpions, Cheap Trick, Heart.
Gosh.
It was like a consortium.
Yeah.
You dig what I mean?
Upper echelon.
it was the business, bro.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know what I mean?
Mm.
And of course, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts was somewhere in the spectrum of that. But the point was, Carol liked me. She just liked my image, you know, in the whole 9 yards. And she said, I want to introduce you to a friend of mine. She set up a meeting with me with this attorney friend of hers. The lady's name was Judy Glover.
Mm.
Turns out her ex-husband's name was Roger Glover, the bass player of Deep Purple. The cosmos spin. I said, hey, balloon head, you're in my life, baby. Hey, balloon head, just singing on Friday side. Hey, balloon head, hey, balloon head. Judy at that time was managing an artist named John Waite, who had been a bass player with this group called the Bevis.
Okay.
John Waite, during that time, had just released a major top 10 hit single called Missing You. I ain't missing you at all.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Since you've been gone away. That John Waite, right? So that was her client, and she was amenable to taking another client because she was riding a wave of success with John Waite. And we just hit it off. And so since I had this relationship at Media Sound Studio, and I took her to the studio to meet Tim and everything, and she just listened to my demos in the setting of Media Sound, you know, listen to my demos through these, you know, massive speakers. Because Media Sound was ensconced in a cathedral. It was like a church. It was converted from a big Catholic church.
Cool.
On 57th between 8th and 9th Street in Midtown Manhattan, right? Beautiful sounding space, and had 3 other sound stages inside of it. But Studio A was like literally like Valhalla, right? Because you were literally recording in a church.
That's beautiful.
It was awesome. So anyway, she heard the material and she was like, oh my God, you know. Now, so she was putting 2 and 2 together, thinking in terms of like, oh my God, like Van Halen is doing X. There's this new band called Bon Jovi that's really coming up, blah, blah, blah. And they're going to be a big deal, you know? And then she's looking at Prince. She's like, and you can easily be like the antithesis of what Prince represents in terms of, you know, like he's this funk, new wave, pop genius thing, right? But it's like your sound is straight up hard rock. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she's like, with your look, this is going to fly. She was convinced. And she took me to the bank and opened up a big line of credit for me. A substantial line of credit on her account so that I could start to conduct sessions of my own on the downtime that I was entitled to at Media Sound. And that's when I started bringing Chris Bailey from Austin and New York.
I see.
And that shifted gears and everything started to go my way from that point forward.
Wow.
Because I had Steve Blucher in my corner because he was the second guitar player, I would work with Steve, bringing him up to speed, like on arrangements that Chris and I had already written in Austin. And then I'd had him. And then, of course, Steve knew everybody, you know. Steve was introducing me to all these people I didn't even know were significant at the time, because at this time I'm meeting all these people like Steve Vai and Joe Satriani and all these guys, you know, and these are just clients of Steve's.
Yeah.
You know.
Just in passing. You just say it's another guitarist.
Yeah, you know what I mean? But I mean, I'm not saying that to name drop. I'm just saying like Steve is just that guy, right?
Yeah.
Because of his electronic genius, his electronic talents, you know what I'm saying? These are people that are seeking him out all the time, right? And he was just a really funny individual, had a funny, quizzical sense of humor, you know what I'm saying? But he's literally like a mad scientist. There's nothing that you could talk to him about a guitar that he can't tell you 2 or 3 other ways to think about it. So that made him the perfect foil for Chris, because Chris is not like technically educated from the electronic side of the equation.
Right.
You dig what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, from a gear perspective.
Yeah. So the way it was working out was that Steve and I became really tight, and he introduced me to a bassist named David Gross. David Gross was like a bass instructor for people like Tom Hamilton from Cheap Trick, and very well connected, like on the session circuits. And so it was just a short matter of time before we started to kind of click up as a unit. So because I had the financial wherewithal to bring Chris up incrementally, like every couple of weeks, I would bring Chris up and we'd book a room, and we'd record like from, let's say hypothetically, from like 10 o'clock at night on a Saturday, on a Friday, and we'd work straight through probably until maybe 10 o'clock the next morning, and then take another hiatus, and then work from, say, Saturday evening until Sunday morning.
Wow.
And get like 2 healthy sessions in over the course of a weekend. And then, of course, then Chris would come back to Austin, and then Tim and I would mix. And then over the course of several of these sessions, now we've got a new set of like 6-song demos recorded at Media Sound Studios, which kind of puts the previous demos to shame.
Yeah.
You dig what I mean?
Yeah. I mean,
so I've got Judy, you know, prepared to kind of like start to go through the machinations of trying to get us aligned with some sort of labels and this, that, and the other thing. But I need to put a band together is the caveat, right?
Right.
So I started down the road of that, and it was about that time when I first met Vernon Reid, because I had begun reading these like little articles in the Village Voice, which is kind of like the weekly arts and entertainment publication. We'll get into the weeds of this maybe in the next session, but I'm just letting you know, it's like through the Village Voice, I became aware of this journalist named Greg Tate, who was a music editor for the Village Voice. And being an African-American music editor, he was really interested in advancing the concept of Black influences on popular culture in particular. And he's the one that first kind of made me aware of the concept of this Black Rock Coalition concept that he and Vernon and a few others had kind of culminated when it was a very new concept, right? And the idea was that they were espousing was that, you know, Black musicians were the cornerstone of the pop music culture of America from its early inception, you know, ever since post-slavery, so to speak, right? And the idea that rock and roll was essentially spearheaded by Black musicians. It had become appropriated, you know, by white industrial complex, to the point where now when you think about rock and roll, you think about it as a white art form. And said the Black Rock Coalition is here to like reverse that trend.
I see.
Right? Because we want to reclaim the authenticity of the legacy of that art form as our indigenous contribution to American pop culture. And I love the fact that it was so articulately thought through. You know what I'm saying? That it wasn't just a situation of them wagging a finger angrily saying, you know, it's a broad stroke across the board that, you know, it's the white industry is trying to erase us from, you know, the concept of our heritage, so to speak. It was way more analytical than that, because Greg was just an exceptional writer, first of all, you know, just a stellar talent. He later went on to, to win a Pulitzer Prize. But my point was, for me to discover a group of young Black intellectual artists was like, the only way I could describe it was kind of like a revelation. Because for so long I had been like the Lone Ranger down here in Austin, right?
Right, yeah.
In Texas.
Yeah.
I mean, there weren't two other musicians in the state of Texas on my frequency for 7 or 8 years. So I've been like operating like a maverick.
Rock Maverick of Texas.
Black Rock Maverick of Texas, I mean, but that's where that expression stems from. I'm an outlier. I'm like a unicorn. Right?
Yeah. Well, you had to be proud of the fact.
Well, not necessarily, because I tell people all the time. I mean, had I been in a situation where there'd been 3 or 4 other like-minded African American individuals like me when I was 19, 20, 21, we would have had a band. I wasn't trying to be like a unicorn. It would have been much easier for me if I had, like that's the point with like Prince had a whole community of like-minded young Black artists around him.
I see.
He didn't spring out of a vacuum. Prince had Andre Simone and Des Dickerson, and you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There was a whole Morris Day. All these people were all part of a zeitgeist and a community. They were active together, rubbing shoulders and coming up together. Prince just had to happen to have more precision and more vision in his execution. So he got his record deal first.
Yeah.
Because he was self-educated, or let's say mentored to become self-educated on multiple instruments, right?
I see.
But you got to remember, Prince was a outlier in his own capacity because he was only like 5'2". So his strength was in his head. It wasn't that he was going to be the biggest athlete, although he was reportedly a really proficient basketball player. He's talented. But his father was a musician. And music culture in his environment was very prolific, right? He was surrounded by a lot of high energy musicians and stimulated and inspired by other, young, high level musicians. A lot of people don't know that Morris Day of the time, fantastic drummer. He's a great drummer. And he theoretically would have been Prince's drummer, except he wanted to have his own thing. That's another sidebar. We'll get into another conversation about it. What I'm trying to say was, in Austin, there was not another, let's say, Black community focused on rock music during my time.
I see.
Had there been, then there would have been, theoretically, a community where you'd have seen me with other Black musicians playing rock music as a consortium.
Yeah.
You feel me?
So you found this through the Black Rock Coalition.
Yeah, and the Black Rock Coalition, it's like I found my lost tribe.
Right.
You feel me? Now, I happen to be 5 years older than Vernon and Greg. As a matter of fact, that was what was kind of ironic about it. When I met them, they kind of struck me like college students. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I literally made a phone call to Greg Tate at The Voice, cold. He didn't know me from a can of paint. I was just like, like a spam caller. But I spoke with enough precision and authority that they put me through to his desk, and he picked up the phone serendipitously. And once we started talking, I, in no uncertain terms, told him, like, look, this thing that you guys been talking about, I've been doing this since like 1972. I'm from Texas. And no sooner I said that, he goes like, well, we need to meet you. I was like, yeah, you do. And vice versa.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. I said, I'd like to meet Vernon Reid. Now, the irony was that before I moved to New York in 1981, there was a publication called Musician Magazine. It was just like a monthly magazine. And it was just focused on eclectic musicians, right? And there was one article that Greg Tate had actually written. This is way before Living Color or any of that stuff. And this article was called The Two Best Guitarists You Never Heard. And it featured this guitarist named Ronnie Drayton, who's like a really famous East Coast session musician.
Okay.
A groundbreaker. And the young gun was Vernon Reid. So I read this whole thing on these two, extraordinary young black guitarists, thinking like, damn, I wish they were in Texas, that sort of thing, right?
Right?
Way before I moved to New York. And I put two and two together that this was the same Greg. And I said, and you wrote that article in Musician, Two Best Guitarists. He's like, yeah, that's me. I said, yeah, bro, I read that a couple of times. I read that article a couple of times. I said, I want to meet Vernon Reid. He said, well, Vernon's right across the hall. And he put me on the phone with Vernon in that conversation.
Wow.
And Vernon said, okay, man, well, you know what? We'd love to meet you, man. We're having a meeting down in Chinatown, whatever, next Saturday, 6 or 7 days from now. Be there or be square, like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, no doubt, And sure enough, went to the meeting. And what was interesting was the first time I met them, there was only like a handful. This was just a handful of people. It wasn't like a big, mixture of people. There was less than 10 people there. You know what I mean? It was a skeleton crew, so to speak.
It was intimate.
But it was like the right skeleton crew. It was the people that were like the founding the people that founded the concept. And it was male and female.
Okay.
It wasn't that all of them were musicians. Some of them were writers. Some of them were, from the theater business. Some of them, so it was an eclectic mixture of individuals.
Yeah.
Like a think tank.
Yeah. I got
you. And that really kind of caught me by surprise. I was really intrigued by that.
Yeah.
Male and female. I'm assuming most of them were in my age group. There was a few that were older than myself. And at this time, I'm still not, I'm still only about 27, 28 years old. But I'm, like I told you before, I'm 5 years older than Vernon and those guys. So when I'm meeting them, I'm looking at these guys and I'm thinking like, man, these guys remind me of like college students.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I'm just thinking like that, right?
Yeah.
What really kind of blew my mind was they had a special guest that afternoon, and it was Lester Bowie from the Art Ensemble of Chicago. Now, when we were talking about bebop and, jazz in one of our earlier conversations, the Art Ensemble of Chicago was kind of like the punk rock movement of jazz.
I see.
And Lester was kind of like the spearhead of this new wave of jazz musicians out of Chicago, right?
I got you.
We're like taking an extension from the first wave of the bebop performers like Charlie Parker and Miles Davis and those guys. Like this guy was like at the vanguard of the Nexus. So he had he was giving us a talk, so to speak. And it was informal, but basically what he was saying was like, what you guys are considering is the same thing that we were considering, is like basically how to avoid being kept in a box.
I see.
Right? It's like this industry is all predicated on boxes upon boxes, check boxes, and then check more boxes, right? He goes, and you just have to keep yourself like free of that sort of mentality.
Yeah.
Completely. In other words, the only way that you're going to ever remain viable is by being elusive, because they want the thing that they can't put a checkbox on. That was kind of like the line of the conversation, and then it opened up into a roundtable discussion. And it was just a really stimulating and exciting intellectual experience. You know what I'm saying? Especially for somebody as cerebral as I am. I'm just a very curious individual. It's not like I'm ever considering myself like the smartest person in the room, but I'm definitely the the nosiest.
Yeah. You're the most curious.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm just always evaluating my perception of what things, because maybe I'm not thinking about something correctly. You know, maybe I don't have the right perception of something.
Keeping your mind open.
So all of that culminated in Vernon going like, yo, bro, did you bring any music?
At the end of the day.
And I'm like, well, yeah, as a matter of fact, I did. Don't think I would come here without it, you know?
That's cool.
And of course I had these fresh tapes from Media Sound that are smoking.
Yeah.
And as they say, the rest is history, because I dropped the cassette and everybody's eyebrows kind of popped up like, what? You know, like that sort of thing. And of course, now we're talking. You know what I mean? So one thing led to another, and over the course of a few meetings, you know, it finally culminated in me going like something to the extent of like, why are y'all afraid of getting paid? You know, it's like we should be taking this to the street, and we should make people aware of it in a very broad and public way, you know, and we should basically start collecting money at the door for the privilege of people coming to see what we have to offer. But the main thing is we want to, what I call, we want to galvanize the community at large. We want to bring all these people from the different boroughs together, you know, in a way that's really powerful, you know? And of course, it's not anything that they hadn't thought of, but nobody had ever just thought to say it out loud. You know what I mean? And just, they were looking at me like, thinking like, well, you know, yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Like that sort of thing, right?
Got a point.
Well, yeah. And I mean, again, I'm in a room of smart people.
Right.
Right? So it's by no means am I saying like, duh.
You're not bringing a new idea. You're just saying it out loud.
Yeah. But I mean, the question was, you know, what are we waiting for? You know what I mean? It's like, let's go. And so in short order, they took that initiative and started organizing what they call the Black Rock Coalition Orchestra. And basically it was kind of like open calls of everybody in that community. Let's have auditions for drummers. Let's have auditions for bass players. Let's have auditions for guitarists, keyboards, etc. Because what we want to do is we want to create like a solid platform for novice artists to come in step 2. And we could basically support them better that way if we've got like a house band. Everybody's not going to have the facility of having a group. You know what I'm saying? It's a situation where it's like if we give everybody a level playing field, you know, they got a song, we can learn their song, and then they can perform that song in public with a capable
band backing them up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I, like everybody else, I auditioned for the drum slide and blah, blah, blah. And then that's how I met Will Calhoun from what would become Living Color. Because I was playing drums for a song that I had written. I'm showing them how this goes. Will just comes into the room. Of course, you know, little did I know he's a graduate of Juilliard. I mean, he's a graduate of Berkeley, right? And had already done like a world tour with like Harry Belafonte, you know, because Will turns out to have been a drum prodigy. You dig what I mean?
Yeah.
But we just hit it off. It wasn't no ego thing going down at all. You know, he's like, man, I dig that footwork, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, man, well, you know, this is what it is, you know, and he sat down and then he just kicked it off just like he was telepathic. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about right there, you know? So anyway, the kismet was instantaneous. And before long, we had this situation where we were performing in public and we had, you know, large crowds performing ostensibly for free to the open public because we're just trying to get the word out.
Right. Playing
in like park band shells and things like that. And we were getting some large crowds, you know, 1,000 people in some cases, you know, 500-600 in most. But because we had the advantage of Greg Tate at the Village Voice as an amplifier.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
It didn't take long for this thing to like snowball.
Wow.
to where it was like a real thing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And the next thing you know, we're doing shows in conjunction with people like Sun Ra. Are you hip to Sun Ra? Okay, that's a sidebar. I'll have to turn you on, you know? But Sun Ra is like a jazz legend of epic proportions that was still living and active on the scene.
Okay.
You know? But what we did, just to kind of round this conversation out, what we wound up doing was by 1987, by the February of 1987, we had kind of polished the situation up enough to where we kind of had identified like 8 bands that were like the spearheads of the whole movement.
Gotcha.
And mine was one of them, Bonsai Kick.
Bonsai Kick, okay.
And so what we did was we had a 2-day rock festival, Black Rock Festival at CBGB. The punk rock mecca.
Yeah.
And we called it Black Rock Nation Time, right?
Wow.
It was, the title of the series was called The Stalking Heads of 87. And we broke the attendance record for CBGB that was held by the Talking Heads.
Unbelievable.
Over the course of the 2 nights. Every journalist, not only in Manhattan, but we had journalists from all over the world at this thing because we had such a long roll up to it. And we can round out this way. Within 3 months, half of the performers had received record offers, myself included.
Thanks for listening. Know someone we should talk to? Give us a shout on Instagram at Austin Music People. Tell your friends, tell your family, and get out there and support Austin music.